Welcome to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. We're so happy that you're joining us for episode 51 here on the Catholic Buzz. Last week we reminisced on the earlier 50 episodes we did together, and it was nice to look back, and so nice to get your comments this week about some compliments about the podcast that we've been having here online for all of you as we discuss random Catholic topics. And in that randomness, I am always joined, of course, my name is Father Daniele, and I'm always joined by Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan. Hello. 51 episodes. We're past that 50 threshold. Yeah, we're past the 1 year. Now it's all downhill from here, maybe. Is it all downhill?
I would have said it's been downhill for a while, but then
I thought so.
Hopefully we're going back uphill a little bit.
I know. Hopefully we'll pick it back up a little bit. Okay, so we are back in our churches are closed again. And so we've been celebrating Mass virtually, and it's very difficult. It's not the same.
It's a lot different. I think just again, getting into that, it's easier now to let Mass go.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is really easier just to be like, oh, it's Sunday. Oh, yeah, okay, I got to watch Mass again. Oh, okay, it's on. Okay, instead of getting into it. Like at one time, I think it was really out of our routine, but this off and on thing, it's really kind of, and then also, if you are one of the ones that are able to go to church and now you're not, you know what I mean? Like you're one of the 30 that got into the church, if that was a regular thing for you on Sundays. Or I find with myself anyways, it was a lot harder going off and on again to make it routine, make it scheduled, make it something. Or, oh my goodness, it's Sunday again. Okay, we gotta, like it catches me on a, I don't know, surprise.
Yeah. It's very disappointing for people, that we can't gather inside of our churches, and disappointing for me as well. It's the sacraments are for the people, but hopefully this will pass, right? This situation in Ontario doesn't seem like it's getting any better, but hopefully it will.
Yeah. It's made them more difficult. I think just that it's happening in waves, that we get to go back to Mass, and it's exciting, and we get to, and then it gets taken away.
Yeah, here in our health unit district, we had like a 1 month. We opened in the middle of March, later than anyone else.
And into red, closed. Not even in the full open. Like we could have been in green, but we went to red for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And then,
but we were able to celebrate Easter together.
Which is right.
That would have been a shame if we were closed for Easter. I mean, it's a shame that we're closed now, but...
And every time we're open, all of a sudden now, I don't know if you guys heard about that new variant now. They're calling it, I think it's the India-Pakistani variant that's coming in. We've got 11 cases or 28 cases, or I can't remember. Like it's in the low numbers, but now they're starting to worry about that. And so every time we just start to slowly get on top of it. Yeah.
I know, and that's what's frustrating for people. Every time you see like a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's like, But I must say, during this time, I've used it, obviously to deepen my own prayer. And despite what happens around us, we got to trust that there is an end to this, and we'll be back to the glory days.
Yeah, It takes, as a parent, I think for me, it takes some time just to kind of, because I'm stuck at being at home, and I have to put down my TV and spend time with my kids now more, which I spend a lot of time with my kids, but there's actually, I've noticed this last week more so, that putting down like a very significant effort to spend time with my kids, to like, okay, no, put away my phone, put away my stuff. I'm going to play chess. I'm going to play checkers.
Right.
I'm going to even playing video games, but I'm trying to even stick away from that, because video games, you don't talk as much as you do. I love playing video games with my kids, but chess and checkers, we actually have some conversation going on. That's really good.
Let me ask you, what's one thing from like pre-pandemic life that you miss right now that you just can't wait to get back to? Like something that's just become a new normal.
You know what? This was just the other day, going to the movies.
Oh yeah.
Someone posted a picture of like the 80s carpet floor and all that stuff, and I was like, oh, like I saw the picture, I smelt the popcorn, and I was like, I haven't gone to a movie in like 2 years. That's something that, because I don't go to the movies very often to begin with, but
Yeah.
One of the things, especially now that the weather's getting nicer and summer's coming around, right before, or I guess the summer before the pandemic, I started to teach the boys how to play tennis. But then last summer, like all playground equipment, and even though you're not touching anything, it's like technically, it's shut down. And now it's looking like it might be the same thing this summer. It's like just to be able to, a nice afternoon, pick up and go, you just don't really have that option anymore. So.
Yes, that's a good point. Like outdoor things, I'm looking forward to indoor things, just gathering. You can't have a party anymore.
I know.
You can't gather after mass anymore. Like those simple things, even in your family, like holidays with you can't have your cousins, just the people who you live with or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Hard to live out your vocation.
What's one? Okay, on this topic, I know we're going past. We're going past what I. But what's one thing that you don't mind that started from the pandemic that you would like to see stay?
I got to be honest, I really do enjoy spending that much time with my family.
Yeah.
I was thinking about it recently. I think there's a time, my boys are old enough now where we have a lot of fun. Like they're getting into their teenage years. And so we do enjoy, like I enjoy having them work with me. I enjoy being with them. There's sometimes that they're a little bit annoying, but for the most part, no, I love them dearly.
I know.
But they are like, I do enjoy spending more time with my family, and it's kind of forcing me to do that.
Yeah.
And even though at times I'd rather watch TV, it's just opening the door.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I'm a homebody. Like I like being at home. I have my wood shop. I have enough to kind of keep me engaged at home. Before the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure to go out and whatever, which is probably good for me. Like it's probably good to kind of bring me out of that that comfortable space.
From your basement.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's that's maybe something that the pandemic has made me realize that even though I'm pretty self-sufficient at home, that's maybe not the best situation, and I'm looking forward to getting back to.
Good, because now we'll get him out more often.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What about you?
Me, this is going to sound really funny, but I don't mind all the extra cleaning that's going on in places.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Like when you show up to a grocery store, now your cart is sanitized, your basket's sanitized, the debit machine is, like you think, I'm not a germaphobe or anything, but you think prior to the pandemic, were those things ever washed?
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Like I don't mind that. I don't mind you get a fresh, clean cart. Like usually you have like things dripping off your cart or basket, and you're going through to find one that's not dripping with sauce that exploded or something like that.
Bathrooms are cleaner. All that stuff.
Everything's cleaner.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah, it really is. Now that you say that, I agree.
Yeah.
Even not worrying too much about the fact that like people are coughing all over your bananas or apples or whatever the case may be because they got to wear a mask. So you're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, okay. I'm still going to wash them, but
exactly.
I don't have
Go ahead, cough on my banana. Yeah.
Let's see how good the masks work. Okay, we went a little long there, but it was fun to talk about. Today, what we're actually talking about is vocations, because this past Sunday was the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. And I think it's just so important that we remind people to not only to pray for vocations, but that we as Catholics have a responsibility to encourage vocations in the church, And I know there's all sorts of vocations, right? I like to obviously focus on religious vocations, but vocation in general, I think, is something we have to pray for, right? People to find their own, and it's just so beautiful because I spoke to a class a number of weeks ago virtually from another city about vocations, and basically they wanted me to give them a definition of a vocation that they can use on their exam.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, here's what it is. And maybe I'm going to screw it up a little bit, but I just said it's a call from God to use the gifts that he's given you for what he's created you to do. That's basically what a vocation is. Yeah. And they were like, what? And they were writing it down, like, say that again, But that's true. That's basically when you hear the word vocation, that's all it is. God has given each of us gifts. Yeah. God has given each of us strengths and personality. And we're supposed to use those things to fulfill what he's put us here for. Whether that's marriage, whether that's a certain career, whether that's a religious vocation or the priesthood or whatever it might be. God has already planted those things in our heart.
Yeah.
Now it's up to us to discover them. But today I feel like we just kind of go with the flow. Hey, like we just land a job. Some people just land a job or fall into a certain studies program, but don't take the actual time to think, what did God place me here for?
we talked about before, God's got perfect will and then permissive will, right? And God's perfect will, living out your vocation. He give you those gifts. Not to say that if you're living out your vocation isn't going to be a struggle. Of course there's going to be a struggle, because through struggle we grow closer to him. But in living out those vocations where you can use all your gifts and talents and where you're going to be the most joyful. Not the happiest, but the most joyful. This is where you're going to find the most joy in your life. It's because you have desires and you have gifts, and those gifts bring you life. Those gifts from the Holy Spirit, gifts from, and God gave you those gifts for a reason. So if your gift was, let's just say your gift was administration work, then you would get joy, get life from doing administration work. It's not one of my favorites, but I do get joy from teaching. Right. And I think teaching is one of my gifts. And so when we go into teaching, when I do teaching, I get life from teaching. I am tuckered out by the end of the day, no matter what, but it's one of my gifts. And so my call, my vocation in life to my family, but through that also is through teaching.
Sure. You're using your gifts in a way that, has been set before you.
Exactly.
And I think that's a process we have to reteach today.
Yeah.
Because, oftentimes parents just kind of say to their kids, maybe they have plans for them. Maybe parents have plans for their kids already. Yeah. You will be a doctor or you will be a police officer or whatever it might be, But for parents to pray with their children about where God is leading you in your life. You guys have 4 kids each. Yeah.
All boys too.
All boys. Yeah, there better be a priest or 2 out of those.
8 sons there.
Yeah, exactly. But to be able to pray with them, and I think it's a beautiful thing to discover what God has placed you here for, right? But we need to teach people how to do that.
Yeah.
And I think we need to. A few weeks ago, we talked about you run into problems when you kind of boil down vocation to just career.
Yes.
That it's like if you're just speaking in career terms, and a lot of times as parents, you're kind of pushing a career direction to your kids, and not necessarily thinking about where they'll end up in terms of vocation.
Yeah.
So, and you do have vocations that are career specific. So, teaching is a great example. Medical work. That it takes a specific skill set, like a specific kind of disposition to really live out that vocation effectively. So there are kind of areas or career areas where you can describe those properly as vocations. But when we were talking earlier about that, some vocations affect an ontological change. So something like priesthood, that it's not just a job, that it's this is a permanent situation that you're called to, that you're prepared for, that you're given the gifts to do.
Being ordained.
Another one is maybe being married, but also having kind of vocations within vocations. So like motherhood, 100%. Fatherhood, those are kind of separate things that people can be called to, can be prepared for, can have gifts specific to those vocations that aren't necessary. So some people that are called to a vocation of being married. But in the situation where they're maybe not able to have children, they're not necessarily called to a specific vocation of fatherhood. Or motherhood. Or I think it's helpful to think about vocation as a calling, as something that affects an ontological change, and not just kind of a desirable career path.
Yeah,
right.
Agreed.
And would you guys say that when you were preparing for marriage, that you were looking at your marriage from that perspective? Like, is this what is this who God has placed for me in my life?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It was actually something that, so I wrestled because I grew up in a good cradle Catholic, but a good Catholic family and stuff. And so it was an option actually for me, was the priesthood. And it was something that my parents, I think, wanted for me at that time. It was a little bit different than sometimes.
You were the first boy in the family.
I'm the first boy in the family, and my parents being who they were and everything else, they really, there's 9 kids. And so they wanted me to be a priest. Not they wanted, I think they felt like that might be what I was supposed to be called to be. So I wrestled with that determination on my heart all throughout being a teenager, but also then throughout before I got married. And so one of the things I remember was bringing it in front of a bishop. Actually, I was stuck in a convent with a bishop in Newfoundland.
Story for another time.
That's a whole other story. But I remember going and talking to him about it, because we were stuck there for 2 weeks, and it just so happened he was taking 2 weeks, and he was going to be in this convent with us too, and like a little 2-week retreat. It was awesome. And I decided to use this time. I was coming back off the road from Net Ministries, and I was going to pray about my relationship with my girlfriend at the time, we'd been dating for about 5 years at that time, but 2 of them I was on the road. It was a long-distance relationship. It was a hard relationship, but we were still together at the end. And that's a miracle in itself. You know what I mean? Net is known to break up relationships pretty quick if they're not meant to be. And so I was thinking, okay, Lord, what's going on here? And he said, but I was struggling with the priesthood. And the priest said, well, there's a desire in your heart, which is good. And he said, but you need to give, like, if you really want to know what God wants, you got to give that will over to God. Just ask him and like sit down, have in adoration, sit there through spiritual guidance and everything else, and really discern where God is calling you to go. Because if you have both desires in your heart, that's good. Mm-hmm. And God is going to show you the right way. And so I ended up doing that, and God made it very clear to me that day. It was so awesome. But he made it very clear to me that day that I was supposed to go home and get married. You know what I mean? And not the desire for priesthood just left, because the desire for ministry was still there, if that makes sense. But the desire that going to become a priest, the guilt of not becoming a priest, maybe that my family was imposing or whatever, didn't leave me at that time. Left me at that time. The guilt was gone, and I realized, no, I'm meant to be married at that time. But I think it's every person needs to go through a discernment of which path they are supposed to go down, whether it be married life or vocational, religious, or the priesthood or something. I think it is and I think people should struggle with it. It shouldn't
of course.
It shouldn't be an easy decision either way. It shouldn't be yes, I'm going this way. Depending on what time you become Catholic. You know?
Yeah,
sure.
In my case, I was kind of mid to late 20s before, that option even presented itself.
Yeah.
So at the time that I decided to do RCIA, priesthood or marriage was kind of a very real possibility either way, because I think I mentioned in a previous episode the idea of going to school for that long is more appealing than it was like, oh man, that sounds terrible. But by the time I was received into the church, it wasn't a 10-year relationship. My wife and I were dating for about a week and a half before we had a pretty clear idea that marriage is where we were being called.
Yeah.
So that's and that's not people's typical experience, I don't think. But by the time I was received into the church, I had, I would say, a pretty clear calling to that I was supposed to be married.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, one, we have someone who's trying to discover their own vocation. 2, we have someone who's either being encouraged or discouraged in their vocation.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about we should struggle with it. It should. This is something, to wrestle with, because we, of course, have our own desires formed by our families or formed by our friendships or formed by where we've been in life. And then there's God's desire for us, right? So it should be it should be a struggle, know. And I remember when I went to the seminary, I knew that there was part of me who was open to the priesthood, but I didn't know at the time that that's where I wanted to fully be, right? And when I was ordained a deacon, 5 years later, my time in the seminary was a beautiful experience. I used the passage of Jeremiah chapter 20 for my scripture quote, because Jeremiah just talks beautifully in this verse of the scriptures, because he says, Lord, you have enticed me, and I was enticed. And that was such a story. That was me. Like, the Lord did entice me, lured me over a little bit. And then Jeremiah continues, you have overpowered me and you have prevailed.
That's awesome.
And it was, for me, that was a really that's exactly what happened. The Lord did entice me over. He had to overpower me. He had to body slam me down and wrestle me to the ground, but he prevailed.
People don't realize that priests go through that struggle. I remember a buddy of mine that was wondering about priesthood, and he went and saw the bishop, and the bishop said to him, "Do you want to get married?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, yes, I have a desire to be married. He said, good. I wouldn't want you. If you said no right there, I wouldn't want you to be a priest. I remember my buddy coming back and just being shocked by that, but realizing, no, it is a sacrifice. Like the vocation of that is a sacrifice, but it's giving it up for God's, right? It is your desire, giving it over.
Look at the John chapter 10 we read this past Sunday. You know, the good shepherd, Jesus is our model. Jesus lays down his life for the sheep.
Yeah.
And the priest, who is in persona Christi, does the same. Like, you know, like me personally, I could have done various things in my life, you know, but when God overpowers you, he prevails, you know, and I honestly can say, sure, it's not life, the life of a priest isn't perfect, but I, in my 5 years as a priest, have had very few bad days, very few, you know, and that comes from what one of you said before. There's sort of an inner joy. It's not perfect. It's not like a perpetual happiness. But when you fulfill God's plan for you, there's an inner peace.
That's right.
There's an inner joy that even you guys know from marriage. You know, there's ups and downs, but there's that inner peace. You know that even though you fight with your wife or whatever it might be, you guys still love each other. You've had a tough day. That bond is stronger than anything, right? So it's the same for the priest. So I want it like for someone who's discerning, who's wrestling, you know, where is God calling me in my life? It's number one, we cannot discover our vocation if we've separated ourselves from our spiritual life.
100%.
Lots of people who say, I don't know where to go in life, they're not praying.
Yep.
People in general aren't praying.
Yeah.
You know, like even people who come to Mass on Sunday, if we don't have a prayer life every day to spend time with God, we have no idea what God's trying to do with us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So prayer life is so important to every day, but we can't separate the two. You know, there are some people who say, well, my vocation in life was to be whatever, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Yeah.
Well, it's just what I'm good at. Sure. But God takes what we're good at and moves us somewhere else sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to be connected in a spiritual life. So for young, like, let's talk about, because everyone will say, well, there's a shortage of priests. Well, no kidding. There's a shortage of faith.
Yeah.
There's a shortage of devotion to Jesus. And not devotion, maybe is not the right word. A commitment of faith, like lack of interest, maybe. So, of course, imagine what our families, our communities, our cities, our world would look like if everyone had fulfilled what God set out for them.
Yeah.
Whew.
Imagine.
What a beautiful place that would be.
Yeah.
Now, it's just this, you know, race of life that people are going through, just kind of, you know, but we can't separate it from a life of faith. We have to be praying. Anyways.
Yeah.
So back to the shortage, of course. Then another obstacle I would say is even Catholics who sit in the pew on Sunday discourage vocations, to religious vocations, I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe even families.
Yeah.
I do that
could
for
imagine,
marriages.
I was going to say, the same. You can easily see how a family would discourage someone from being a priest if. So whenever someone discourages you from your own path that God has called you to, I would say you have to look at the motive behind the person, and is it being selfish? Not to you, but if I was being encouraged to be a priest or being encouraged to be have kids and have families, what is the motive behind it? Because I've learned very quickly on that God doesn't tell me what is good for Matt.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
If Matt's praying and doing his own thing, two things. God doesn't normally tell us two different things. If me and Matt are in some sort, like if I'm Matt's father or something, and then if I'm praying really for what's good for Matt, then God is going to let me mind my own business or sometimes steer Matt in the right direction. But it's Matt's call overall. And if Matt's doing the right thing, praying and have a spiritual life, then God's going to use that and steer him in the right direction.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's a really good thing that you said, because it's looking at the motivation, the intention of someone, right? Because it is our duty to recognize gifts in people.
Yeah.
Like for us to say, Matt, you're really good at this. Have you considered what God's trying to do in your life with those gifts that you have? That's something we should be doing, right? But for so that doesn't mean we shouldn't comment on people's gifts or future path. But if we start saying to Matt, like, you shouldn't be a priest because
Yeah. I want kids. I want grandkids.
Exactly, or
I want
whatever it might
grandkids.
be. That intention is not.
And to be honest with you, a lot of times, let's say they're not saying grandkids, because that's only parents, right?
Yeah,
That really care
exactly.
about that.
Yeah,
but let's
yeah.
say it's people outside of that. If they were encouraging people not to, because you're never going to be able to have sex. That's something that I've heard when encouraging young people to look at vocations, is other people encouraging them, you can't have sex. That's putting sex at a position above the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like that's like, because as humans, we only live for sex. And so can you imagine, no, that's like, take that out of the equation. That's not, yes, that's something you have to give up, but it's not something that's the be all end all of your life,
Yeah, and I just want to, on that note, say that rarely do I find a priest or a sister or a deacon, someone who serves the church, who has followed the path because of an authentic vocation, like an authentic calling from God. I have rarely seen them not joyful.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not to say, I mean, sure, people have encounters with priests where they're not joyful, and
They're still human.
But people who are passionate about what they do because it was truly what God has called them to, just like in marriage, just like in any vocation. If it's God that's brought you to this moment, there's beautiful things that happen from that, right? I just want to turn the table here quickly on. So we know if someone is thinking whatever it might be, whether it's career related, marriage, priesthood, religious life, whatever it might be, if you're wondering what to do with your life, see a spiritual director. Go see your priest.
What do you mean by spiritual director?
Yeah, I would go see a priest first or a religious sister and ask them who would they recommend for them. Because what I do when I meet with someone for the first time, I listen to what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And then I kind of put them in the right direction of who they should be talking to.
Right? Because people have their other, like you said, spiritual directors also have their gifts.
Exactly.
So this is more counseling person. This is more someone who can direct them.
Yeah, and it's very important that spiritual direction is not counseling. Spiritual direction is, where is God leading me in my life?
Okay, good. There you go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that part of spiritual direction you don't talk about things that you struggle with or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not counseling. Okay? Spiritual direction is for you and a director to really discern where the Holy Spirit is leading you in your life. Okay?
Yeah.
And you don't only need a spiritual director when you're considering these things. You can use one for other major events in your life as well. Okay, so that's the first thing. I would like talk, because today young people go online.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a priest? Or should I become a priest or whatever like that? Google doesn't have the answer for you.
No.
God does. So speak to someone who is, and don't ask, I always say to students at school, don't start talking about this stuff with an uncle who's upset at the church or something. You got, who's going to say, what the heck are you doing that for?
Yeah.
Go talk to a priest you trust and can have a conversation with. He holds that in confidence. He's not going to put on his social media that you might be thinking of a vocation or whatever.
No,
like that,
he's not going to kidnap you and put you in the seminary.
That's right.
That doesn't happen. And you're not going to get endless emails from them just saying, okay, have you decided today?
Exactly.
Have you decided today? Have you decided
and
today?
I can say, as the vocation director for our diocese, the first time anyone reaches out to me, all I say is, come and meet with me. We're just going to discover, first we're going to work on your relationship with God. That's it. Because no matter what you decide, when your relationship with God is in the right place, you're gonna be with that peace and that joy. You know what I mean? It's not like, here's an application form for the seminary. I don't do that. I wait. I make sure someone is comfortable in their faith first. Because before you become a good married man, a good Catholic husband, before you become a good Catholic priest, you have to be a good Catholic first.
Yeah.
You have to be a good Christian first, and that's what we're forming first. Okay?
Look, I was going to just say, on that note, again, the world looks at it as a business proposition, whereas as the church looks at it as a vocation, a calling from God. This is where. So even though there's a shortage of priests, it's not like you're going to be recruited. Like in the army, there's a shortage of soldiers. We need you. You're in. Oh, you know what? You need glasses. We're going to look past that requirement right now. Let's throw you in there. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen or shouldn't happen in someone looking or discerning the priesthood. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole series of tests that you have to go through.
Sure.
There's 7 years, 8 years of discernment.
Yeah.
before you actually have to make your final vows, right?
Okay, and now what about people who are encouraging? Because we have just a few minutes left, and so people who, like, we're talking to regular Catholics. You might, already be married. You might be widowed. You might be in your the middle of your life, or the end of your life, or the whatever it might be. How does anyone encourage people to find their vocation?
I would say that there are ways that you're probably already leaning towards or living out that vocation. So like one example from my life is before I even became Catholic, I won't name names because someone came to me and she was slightly intoxicated. I was working campus police at the university at the time. And she was this really friendly person. And she started talking about this board game. I was like, I haven't played that board game, but I like board games. And it was just like this really, really strange encounter. But this person was just like, you have to come over. Like she was in a household of Catholic girls. Yeah. And she was like, you have to come over, you have to play this. Like that relationship, that friendship started with an invitation to play a board game when she was slightly intoxicated. She's now a nun. She's now a religious sister, and she was instrumental. Like that was the kind of kickoff point. But she was instrumental in kind of the step by step of getting me, connected with chaplaincy, having those kind of early discussions that, really set me on the right track for me coming to faith, and ultimately, what ended up becoming my vocation is that she was already living out the virtues of religious life in that situation that you would not expect, that she was encouraging me to be involved with this community, be involved with the church, and same with people who are called to the vocation of marriage, that there's probably already some inclination, some desire for the fruits and the virtues of that vocation. So as a community, we can recognize that. I know we're fathers of young boys. That if we see that disposition emerging in them, that maybe they're called to the priesthood, we want to foster that. We want to encourage that. We want to kind of get them altar serving, get them involved, and really set them up as well as we can for whatever vocation God is calling them to. And we want to be kind of open to that calling, like open as individuals, as parents, but also as, a community, and not letting our own kind of interests or desire for ways down the road, but like grandchildren or whatever, kind of short circuit our kind of more mature understanding of kind of vocation, rather than just kind of career path, or this is what we want our kids to be.
Yeah, and on top of that, on top of encouraging people and noticing signs within them and giving them an encouraging word, we should also try our best to foster a sense of community with our priests and religious sisters, married couples in the parish, because oftentimes people sit in the pew and then they go home and will complain about their priest, or complain about a religious sister or brother, or the married couple sitting in front of them in the pew who brought their kid to the mass for the first time, or something like that. But that's our community. Our community needs to be one of encouragement.
Welcoming,
thank you, Sister So and So, for this. I really appreciated that. Thank you, Father, or congratulations, Matt and Teresa Marie, for you're bringing your newborn to mass. That's so sweet. Or that's part of the Christian community, but we don't often do that. We often, if we do share something, mostly they're complaints. I'm not saying you can never complain, to do so with charity, but I think that whole mindset has to be there, where we encourage people.
I think if people were to take it into their daily prayer.
Yeah.
And that's where, if you pray and ask God, okay, God, give it to me, or maybe make a specific day. I mean, we talk about evangelization and some other things we were talking about before the show, but you take a specific time, Lord, give me who in my life is it? Think about the people around you. Is it a neighbor kid? Is it? I'm thinking about the younger generation,
sure.
Right? But it could be an older generation. It could be someone who is widowed and is looking. Maybe it's a woman that wants, or a man, that either one that might want to change their vocation at that time. Maybe God's calling them to that. But if you're looking, who in your life is it? Is it a neighbor? Is it one of your children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews? Who is it? So pray about that. Ask God who it comes, and let God give you someone to come to mind, and then pray for that person. Pray for that person on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But then what you're specifically asking God for is for the opportunity. Okay, God, I'm not gonna just make this happen on my own. So if you want me to start this, get this, help foster this relationship, you need to help me with that. And so it's amazing. God opens up the opportunity so you can talk to this person, to give you an idea, I was praying for some person kind of on this idea, and this person ended up on a 8-hour road trip with me randomly. And I was like, and I was stuck beside him in the seat, and I don't talk very much, but so anyways, but it was 8 hours of discussing with this person, and
8 hours, that would be like the length of a podcast if you were in charge.
That's right. So, but it was amazing how but through the prayer and through that, God opened up that conversation and the discussion. You're able to talk, and you're able to, and again, it's not like you need to be a priest. It's fostering that relationship and encouraging, like you said that the woman did with you, is a fostering a relationship, and slowly and then pointing it out to them. Do you see this in yourself? Oh, do you see this? Oh, But letting God, if you're praying for it, if you are close in your spiritual life, if you're on track, God's going to lead you to those people. And like you said, that person that you were talking to, I bet you she was on track with her spiritual life because she was able then to reach out when you were available. Boom. And God's just going to open those people up in front of you. And if you're specifically praying about vocations, God, use me to help get vocations for your church, I think he's going to do it. But you got to ask him, and you got to be open to the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think everyone needs to just realize we all play a part in fostering vocations, whatever that vocation might be. Teachers in schools. Students won't find their vocation if we're not teaching them faith. Parents, your children won't find their vocation, whatever it might be, if we're not talking about faith or praying at home, or encouraging that. We're in the community, in the church community, if we're not focused on growing deeper in love with Jesus, we're not going to discover our vocation. The more we know God, the more we discover what he wants to do with us in our life. Okay, we are way over time, but this past Sunday, I encouraged people, if they had, for priesthood and religious life, if they knew a priest or a sister that really impacted their life, and if they're deceased, to pray for them. If they're still alive, to reach out to them, send them a note, send them an email or whatever, just thanking them, maybe sharing with them how they've been blessed, because I think that's very important. We have to be, once we're grateful for the people who have laid down their life like the Good Shepherd to serve the church, then that helps us try to encourage more vocations in the church, and desire that for other people as well, right? So maybe you can pray for that. It was the World Day of Prayer for Vocations, so pray for vocations first and foremost in the church. And thanks for the discussion. And that's it for this week, because we're way over time. I know I will be. I pray every day for an increase in vocations for our parish community, for our diocese, for our church throughout the world. So maybe that's something that people can. We used to give challenges on this on the podcast. Maybe that's a challenge this week to either reach out to someone, to pray, to ask the Lord to place someone on your heart. We asked people this past Sunday to reach out to someone. And then right after we celebrated Mass, me and the altar servers and the deacon went into the sacristy, and I thanked Deacon Allen for his ministry to the church. And he was very grateful for that, just saying thank you to that. And I think you were present at that moment too, and the altar servers were kind of watching this happen. It's a beautiful thing to be thanked.
For sure.
So maybe it's something that people can consider this week.
It's acknowledgement of your service.
Exactly. Whoever it is, someone in your life that's sort of helped you in your faith life. Okay, that's it. My name is Father Daniele, and that's all of the time we have. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milgen, we'll see you next time on another episode of The Catholic Buzz.